Ambassador Veltar stood before the quantum communication array with his forearms trembling. His blue skin had turned pale with fear as he watched the holographic display showing another Zilani world burning. The Korthik Empire had struck again. And this time they had consumed the entire population of Zeltos Prime in just 3 days. The Zilani Federation was dying and Veltar knew it. For 200 years his people had lived in peace across 12 star systems. They were herbivores who built beautiful cities and created art that could make other species weep with joy. They had never known war because they had never needed to fight. Their technology focused on healing and building rather than destroying. Now that peaceful nature was killing them, the Korthik were monsters from the worst nightmares. These insectoid creatures stood 8 feet tall with razor-sharp claws and mandibles that could crack bone. Their black carapaces reflected no light, and their red eyes showed no mercy. They bred fast and ate everything including other thinking beings. When they found a world, they stripped it completely bare before moving to the next target. 3 Zilani worlds had already fallen. Millions of his people were dead or worse, kept alive as food sources for the Korthik hives. The Federation military was a joke compared to these invaders. Zilani ships were built for exploration and trade, not combat. Their weapons were designed to stun, not kill. Against the Korthik bioships that healed themselves and grew stronger from battle damage, the Zilani stood no chance. That was why Veltar was here in the deepest part of the Federation capital ship. The quantum array could reach across thousands of light years to contact species they had only recently discovered. One of those species called themselves humans, and they lived on a world called Earth. The first contact had been friendly, but brief. The humans seemed curious about other life but had not shared much about themselves. Veltar activated the communication system and began recording his message. His voice shook as he spoke, but he forced himself to continue. The survival of his entire species depended on this transmission reaching the humans and convincing them to help. People of Earth, this is Ambassador Veltar of the Zilani Federation. We are sending this message in desperation because our worlds are being destroyed. An enemy called the Korthik Empire is consuming our planets and our people. We have tried to fight them, but we are not warriors. Our weapons cannot stop them, and our ships cannot match theirs. They have already taken 3 of our worlds and killed millions of our citizens. He paused to steady himself before continuing. We know we have little to offer a species as advanced as yours, but we beg for your protection. We can share our medical technology which can heal almost any injury. We have rare minerals that exist nowhere else in this galaxy. We can offer trade agreements and friendship that will last forever. Please help us. If you do not respond soon, there will be no Zilani left to save. The message was sent into the void between stars, traveling faster than light toward the human home system. Veltar could only hope it would reach them in time and that they would choose to respond. He had studied what little information the Federation had about humans, and what he found both encouraged and worried him. Humans appeared to be omnivores like the Korthik, but they showed signs of being highly intelligent and social. Their planet showed evidence of massive industrial development and energy usage that suggested advanced technology. Most interesting was the fact that their world showed clear signs of having survived multiple nuclear wars. This meant humans knew how to fight and how to recover from devastating conflicts. Captain Ryan Cole was enjoying a quiet shift aboard the exploration vessel UHS Discovery when the communication officer called out. Lieutenant Sharon Davis had picked up an unusual quantum transmission from outside human space. The message wasn't broken but understandable, English, and contained a desperate plea for help. Ryan listened to the full message twice before ordering. His communications officer descended directly to Earth Command. Admiral Lisa Grant would need to hear this immediately. The humans had been exploring this region of space for only 5 years, and this was their first contact with a species asking for military assistance. Within hours, the message had reached Admiral Grant at the massive orbital facility above Earth. She called an emergency meeting of the Defense Council and played the Zilani transmission for the assembled officers. The room fell silent as they listened to the fear in Ambassador Veltar's voice. Gentlemen and ladies, Admiral Grant said when the message ended, we have a decision to make. This is our first chance to establish ourselves as a major power in this region of space. The Zelani seem peaceful and they are offering valuable resources in exchange for protection. The question is whether we want to get involved in an alien war. General Paul Scott spoke first. Man, the Zelani are clearly outmatched by this Korthek Empire. If we agree to help them, we need to be prepared for a real fight. These Korthek sound like a serious military threat, Admiral Grant nodded. That is exactly why we need to respond quickly and decisively. If we help the Zelani, we send a message to every species in this galaxy that humans protect their allies. If we ignore their plea, we look weak and unreliable. The vote was unanimous. Within 12 hours, Admiral Grant had authorized Operation Iron Shield and the largest human military deployment in their short spacefaring history. The Zelani had asked for protection, and they were about to learn what that meant when humans made a promise. The human response came faster than anyone thought possible. Within 72 hours of receiving the Zelani distress call, Earth Command had mobilized the largest military fleet in human history. Ships that had been scattered across human space suddenly converged on the Sol system like iron filings drawn to a magnet. Colonel Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the massive dreadnought UHS Retribution and watched the final preparations. The ship was a monster of metal and weapons that stretched nearly 2 kilometers from bow to stern. Its hull bristled with railguns, plasma cannons, and missile tubes. Deep in its belly sat 50,000 Marines in cryosleep, along with enough weapons and ammunition to level a planet. Jake had fought in the corporate wars and the Luna Rebellion, but nothing had prepared him for this scale of deployment. The Retribution was flanked by 2 destroyers, the S Vengeance and S Fury, each carrying another 10,000 troops and enough firepower to sterilize a moon. Behind them came supply ships, medical vessels, and mobile shipyards that could build new weapons while traveling between stars. Dr. Amy Rodriguez worked frantically in her laboratory aboard the Retribution. As the fleet's xenobiologist, she had been given every scrap of information about the Korthek that human intelligence could gather. What she found made her blood run cold. The Korthek were not just aggressive, they were designed for war at a genetic level. Their bioships were actually living creatures that could heal battle damage and adapt to new weapons. Their warriors were bred in batches of thousands and felt no fear or doubt. Most disturbing was their ability to consume other species and somehow absorb useful genetic traits. The Korthak had been conquering and eating their way across the galaxy for over 1,000 years, but Amy also found something else in the intercepted communications. The Korthek showed weakness to certain sound frequencies that disrupted their nervous systems. She immediately began developing sonic weapons that could exploit this vulnerability. If humans were going to war with these monsters, they needed every advantage they could get. Commander Pete Davis oversaw the deployment of automated defense platforms around the Zelani homeworld. These stations were marvels of human engineering that could track and destroy hundreds of targets simultaneously. Each platform carried enough nuclear missiles to crack a small moon and point defense systems that could shoot down incoming projectiles the size of grains of sand. The Zelani watched in amazement as human ships took positions around their world. They had expected maybe a small patrol force or a few advisors. Instead, they got an armada that could have conquered their entire federation without breaking stride. The humans moved with military precision that spoke of centuries of warfare and conflict. Ambassador Veltar met with Colonel Morrison aboard the Retribution and found himself staring at a man whose eyes held depths of violence the peaceful Zelani could barely comprehend. Jake was polite and professional, but there was something predatory about the way he analyzed everything he saw. This was a being bred for war just as surely as the Korthek. Ambassador, Jake said as they walked through the ship's corridors, I need you to understand something about humans. When we make a promise to protect someone, we take that very seriously. The Korthak have threatened our new allies, and that makes them our enemies. We will not stop until they are no longer a threat to you or anyone else. Veltar nodded but felt a chill run down his spine. He had asked for protection but was beginning to realize he might have unleashed something even more dangerous than the Korthak. The human soldiers he saw preparing for battle moved with deadly efficiency. Their weapons were designed not just to kill but to completely destroy. Their armor made them look like metal demons, and their faces showed no emotion. At ALL, Dr. Rodriguez briefed the command staff on Korthak biology and tactics. She explained how their ships worked and how their warriors fought. The humans listened carefully and began adapting their own weapons and strategies. They developed new ammunition types that could penetrate Korthak carapaces and created battle plans that exploited the enemy's hive mind structure. The most terrifying thing about the human response was how quickly they adapted to fighting an enemy they had never seen before. Within days, they had analyzed every piece of Korthak technology they could find and developed countermeasures. They studied the alien psychology and found ways to turn the Korthak's own strengths against them. Captain Susan Clark commanded one of the destroyer escorts and spent her time drilling her crew for combat against bioships. Her weapons officer, Lieutenant Tony Park, had modified their plasma cannons to fire at frequencies that would cause maximum damage to living tissue. Their boarding parties carried weapons that sprayed acid designed to eat through Korthak armor. The preparations were interrupted when long-range sensors detected the approach of a Korthak scouting force. 12 bioships were heading toward the Zilani homeworld, expecting to find the same helpless prey they had encountered before. Instead, they were about to make first contact with humanity and learn why humans had survived and prospered on a world that tried to kill them every day. Commander Davis activated the defense platforms and targeted the incoming ships. The platforms had been designed to fight human opponents who used stealth technology and electronic warfare. Against the Korthak bioships that relied on natural armor and regeneration, they were massively overpowered. Colonel Morrison gave the order to open fire, and the space around the Zilani homeworld lit up with weapons fire. The automated platforms launched salvos of nuclear missiles, while the human ships added their own firepower to the barrage. The Korthak scouts had expected to find a few patrol boats and instead ran into a wall of destruction that vaporized half their force in the first 30 seconds. The surviving Korthak ships tried to flee but found themselves trapped by human pursuit vessels that had been waiting in ambush. The bioships were fast, but human ships were faster and their weapons had longer range. One by one, the Korthak scouts were hunted down and destroyed, until nothing remained but expanding clouds of organic debris. The battle lasted less than 10 minutes, but sent shockwaves throughout the Korthak Empire. For the first time in their history, they had encountered a species that could match their aggression and exceed their capacity for violence. The humans had not just defeated the scout force, they had obliterated it so completely that no survivors remained to report back. Ambassador Veltar watched the battle from the observation deck of a Zilani orbital station and felt his world shift beneath his feet. The humans had not just protected his people, they had sent a message to the Korthak Empire that any attack on the Zilani would be met with overwhelming force. The question now was whether the Korthak would take the hint and withdraw or escalate the conflict into something that could consume entire star systems. The Korthak response came 3 weeks later in the form of a massive fleet that dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zilani system. Hive Lord Skrecht commanded over 200 bioships ranging from small fighters to massive dreadnoughts that pulsed with organic weaponry. The Korthak had ruled this region of space for centuries and no species had ever successfully challenged their dominance. Skrecht stood 8 feet tall with a black carapace that reflected the light from his command ship's bioluminescent controls. His red compound eyes could track dozens of targets simultaneously, while his razor-sharp mandibles clicked in anticipation of the feast to come. The Korthak had consumed 3 Zilani worlds already and expected this final assault to end their resistance forever. The humans had other plans. Colonel Morrison watched the enemy fleet approach on his tactical displays and felt a familiar calm settle over him. This was what humans did best. They took an enemy that thought they were unbeatable and taught them otherwise. The UHS Retribution moved into position alongside her escort destroyers while defense platforms powered up their weapon systems. Lieutenant Sarah Kim sat in the cockpit of her fighter preparing for launch from the Retribution's flight deck. The F-47 Razorback was humanity's latest space superiority fighter, and it carried enough firepower to take down ships 10 times its size. Sarah had scored 12 kills during the corporate wars and was looking forward to adding some alien targets to her record. Behind her in the fighter bay, Sergeant Ben Turner checked his boarding equipment one final time. His assault team carried weapons designed specifically for fighting the Korthek: acid rounds that could eat through their carapaces, sonic grenades that disrupted their nervous systems, and plasma cutters that could slice through bioship hulls. Like paper, the battle began when the Korthek fleet reached weapons range and opened fire with their organic artillery. Bioplasma bolts streaked across space toward the human defensive line, while living missiles that looked like giant insects swarmed toward their targets. The Korthek expected their enemies to break and run just like every other species they had fought. Instead, the humans opened fire with weapons the Korthek had never seen before. Railguns hurled tungsten slugs at relativistic speeds that punched through bioship armor like it was made of paper. Nuclear missiles detonated in brilliant flashes that cooked organic tissue down to the molecular level. Plasma cannons fired streams of superheated matter that burned through living hulls and turned ship interiors into furnaces. The Korthek bioships tried to regenerate the damage, but found themselves overwhelmed by the sheer volume of incoming fire. Human weapons were designed to cause maximum destruction in minimum time, and they delivered on that promise. Bioships that had survived hundreds of battles found themselves crippled or destroyed within minutes of engaging human forces. Hivelord Skrecht watched in growing horror as his fleet was systematically torn apart. The humans fought with a cold efficiency that made the Korthek look like amateurs. Every shot was precisely aimed, every maneuver was perfectly timed, and every tactical decision was calculated to cause maximum damage to the enemy. Sarah Kim led her fighter squadron through the Korthek formation like a scythe through wheat. The alien fighters were fast and maneuverable, but they relied on biological reflexes that were no match for human technology. Her targeting computer could track and engage multiple targets simultaneously, while her weapons could destroy biofighters with single hits. The Korthek pilots found themselves outmatched by opponents who fought with machine-like precision. Human fighters worked together in perfect coordination while their weapons never seemed to miss. Within an hour, the Korthek fighter screen had been completely destroyed, leaving their capital ships exposed to human assault. Sergeant Turner led his boarding parties onto damaged Korthek bioships through hull breaches torn open by human weapons. The interior of the alien vessels was a nightmare of organic corridors that pulsed like living tissue and chambers filled with digestive acids. The Korthek warriors they encountered were fierce but unprepared for human close combat tactics. The humans moved through the bioships like a plague, destroying everything they encountered. Their acid rounds ate through Korthek armor, while their sonic weapons left the aliens writhing in agony. Turner's team methodically worked their way to the ship's nerve centers and planted explosive charges that would prevent the vessels from regenerating. Dr. Rodriguez monitored the battle from her laboratory and gathered data on Korthek capabilities. What she found confirmed her worst fears about their adaptability, but also revealed critical weaknesses. The bioships were incredibly tough, but they required massive amounts of energy to maintain their regenerative abilities. If that energy could be disrupted, the ships would be vulnerable. She immediately began working on a new weapon design that could interfere with the bioship's energy distribution systems. The humans were winning this battle, but Rodriguez knew the Korthek would adapt and return with new strategies. The war was far from over and humanity needed every advantage they could get. The battle reached its climax when the UHS Retribution engaged Hivelord Skrecht's flagship in direct combat. The massive bioship launched waves of living projectiles, while its hull rippled with defensive systems that tried to absorb incoming fire. The human dreadnought responded with a bombardment that lit up space for thousands of kilometers. Colonel Morrison watched his weapons tear into the enemy flagship and felt a grim satisfaction. The Korthek had thought they were apex predators, but they had never faced a species that had perfected warfare over thousands of years of constant conflict. Every human weapon system was the product of centuries of evolution, driven by the need to kill other humans more efficiently. The Korthek flagship began to break apart under the sustained bombardment. Its biohull could not regenerate fast enough to repair the damage, and critical systems started failing throughout the ship. Hive Lord Skrekk realized with growing panic that his forces were not just losing, they were being annihilated. The remaining Korthek ships tried to retreat but found themselves pursued by human vessels that showed no mercy. The humans had not come to win a battle, they had come to send a message. Every Korthek ship was hunted down and destroyed until only debris remained floating in space. Hive Lord Skrekk managed to escape in a damaged cruiser, but not before transmitting a desperate warning to the Korthek Empire. The message was simple and terrifying. Humanity was not just another prey species to be consumed. They were predators that made the Korthek look like herbivores, and they would not stop until every threat to their allies was eliminated. The Battle of the Zilani homeworld lasted 18 hours and ended with the complete destruction of the Korthek fleet. Not a single human ship was lost, while over 200 alien vessels were reduced to expanding clouds of organic matter. The Zilani watched in awe and terror as their protectors demonstrated why humans had clawed their way to the top of the food chain on one of the most dangerous worlds in the galaxy. Ambassador Veltar stood on the observation deck of his orbital station and watched human crews cleaning up the battlefield. The efficiency with which they disposed of enemy remains and salvaged useful technology spoke of a species that had turned warfare into an art form. The Zilani had asked for protection, but they were beginning to understand they had allied themselves with something far more dangerous than the Korthek. Emperor Jaxx received the news of Hive Lord Skrekk's defeat in his throne chamber deep within the Korthek homeworld. The massive insectoid ruler stood 12 feet tall with a carapace that had been hardened by 1,000 battles. His red eyes burned with rage as he listened to the report of how 200 bioships had been destroyed by an unknown species calling themselves humans for over a millennium. The Korthek Empire had expanded across the galaxy, consuming everything in their path. No species had ever successfully resisted them for long, and certainly none had achieved such a complete victory. The destruction of an entire fleet without losing a single ship. Unthinkable, yet the evidence was undeniable. Jaxx issued orders that mobilized the full might of the Korthek Empire. Over 10,000 bioships began converging on the Zilani sector, while breeding facilities worked overtime to produce new warrior castes. The Emperor had decided that these humans represented an existential threat that needed to be eliminated before they could spread their influence further. The human response was swift and decisive. General Matt Phillips arrived from Earth Command with reinforcements that tripled the size of the human fleet. The veteran officer had fought in more wars than most people could count, and his tactical genius had saved humanity during the darkest days of the corporate wars. Phillips established defensive positions around 17 Zilani worlds, turning each one into a fortress that could withstand prolonged siege. Human engineering crews worked around the clock to build orbital defense platforms, minefields, and automated weapon systems. The Zilani watched in amazement as their star systems were transformed into death traps for any attacking force. Major Kate Wilson oversaw the construction of the orbital defense grids that would protect the most vulnerable Zilani colonies. The platforms she designed could track and engage thousands of targets simultaneously, while their nuclear arsenal could sterilize entire fleets. Each installation was built to operate independently even if all other defenses failed. Chief Engineer Rob Clark worked with Dr. Rodriguez to develop new weapons specifically designed to exploit Korthek weaknesses. They created ammunition that disrupted bioship regeneration systems and developed targeting computers that could identify critical organs within living vessels. The humans approached this war like a scientific problem that needed to be solved. Through superior technology and tactics, the first probe attacks came within a month as Korthak scout forces tested human defenses around the outer Zalani colonies. These skirmishes revealed that the Empire had learned from their previous defeat and was adapting their tactics. The bioships now traveled in smaller groups and used hit-and-run attacks rather than direct assaults. Captain Don Harper led Deep Strike missions into Korthak territory using specially modified destroyers that could penetrate enemy space undetected. His ships carried weapons that the galaxy had never seen before, planet crackers that could shatter worlds stellar, manipulators that could destabilize stars, and swarm missiles that turned entire fleets into expanding clouds of debris. Harper's raids targeted Korthak breeding facilities and supply lines, crippling their ability to replace losses. The humans had studied their enemy's psychology and understood that the Korthak depended on their reputation for invincibility. By striking at the heart of their territory, Harper was sending a message that nowhere was safe from human retaliation. Dr. Carol Lee joined the war effort by developing biological weapons that could target the Korthak reproductive cycle. Her research into alien genetics allowed her to create viruses that would sterilize entire hive populations without affecting other species. The Zalani were horrified by these weapons, but the humans saw them as necessary tools for ending the conflict. Quickly, the Korthak Empire began to realize they were facing an enemy unlike any they had encountered before. The humans did not just wage war, they perfected it through constant innovation and adaptation. Every engagement revealed new human capabilities while their tactical doctrines seemed to anticipate Korthak moves before they were made. Jax received reports of entire sectors going dark as human strike forces eliminated Korthak outposts and colonies. The bioships that had conquered 1,000 worlds found themselves outmatched by human technology and tactics. Worse still, the humans seemed to show no mercy and took no prisoners. The Emperor decided to launch a massive offensive that would overwhelm human defenses through sheer numbers. He assembled the largest fleet in Korthak history, over 5,000 bioships supported by 1 billion warrior drones. This armada would sweep through Zalani space and destroy the human fleet before continuing on to attack Earth itself. General Phillips received intelligence about the approaching Korthak fleet and began final preparations for what would become known as the Battle of Seven Suns. The humans had spent months preparing for this moment and were ready to demonstrate why their species had survived on a world that tried to kill them every day. The human fleet that assembled to meet the Korthak armada was smaller but infinitely. Each ship carried weapons that could destroy multiple bioships, while their crews had trained for scenarios that would break lesser species. Admiral Steve Collins commanded from the massive battleship HFY Devastation while his subordinates prepared for the largest space battle in galactic history. Lieutenant Commander Julie Park led special forces teams that would infiltrate Korthak command ships during the battle. Her soldiers carried weapons and equipment that seemed like magic to other species but were simply the products of human ingenuity applied to the problem of killing efficiently. They would target the hive minds that controlled Korthak fleets and turn the enemy's greatest strength into a weakness. Professor Tim Brooks had developed psychological warfare programs that exploited the Korthak hive mind structure. His research showed that disrupting communication between bioships could cause cascade failures throughout entire fleets. The humans planned to use this weakness to turn the Korthak's numerical advantage against them. The Korthak fleet approached the Zalani homeworld, expecting to find a small human force that would be quickly overwhelmed. Instead, they encountered a defensive network that had been specifically designed to destroy their ships and tactics. The humans had studied every aspect of Korthak warfare and created countermeasures for each threat. The battle began when long-range sensors detected the approaching armada and human weapons opened fire at distances the Korthak thought impossible. Missiles that could track targets across star systems and energy weapons that could punch through any armor began tearing into the alien fleet before they could respond. The Korthak discovered that the humans did not fight like any other species they had encountered. Where other enemies relied on courage or desperation, the humans used cold calculation and overwhelming firepower. They did not seek to defeat the Korthic fleet, they sought to annihilate it so completely that no survivors would remain to threaten. Their allies again, Emperor Jacques watched from his command ship as the greatest fleet in Korthic history was systematically destroyed by an enemy that fought with machine-like precision. The humans had not just prepared for this battle, they had planned for the complete elimination of the Korthic Empire as a threat to galactic peace. The Zilani observed the approaching battle from their fortified worlds and began to understand that they had not hired protectors, they had allied themselves with exterminators. The humans were about to demonstrate why their species had earned the right to exist in a universe that showed no mercy to the weak or unprepared. The Battle of Seven Suns lasted 3 days and reshaped the balance of power across the galaxy. Admiral Steve Collins commanded a fleet of 500 human warships, each one capable of sterilizing planets and each crew trained to fight in ways that would horrify civilized species. The humans had not come to win battles, they had come to eliminate the Korthic Empire as a functioning civilization. The opening phase saw human weapons reaching across impossible distances to strike Korthic bioships before they could close to combat range. Relativistic kill vehicles accelerated to near light speed punched through alien armor like it was made of tissue paper. Nuclear warheads designed to crack moons vaporized bioships that had survived centuries of warfare. The Korthic found themselves fighting an enemy that had weaponized the fundamental forces of the universe. Emperor Jacques watched his greatest fleet die and realized he was facing something beyond his comprehension. The humans did not just defeat Korthic ships, they erased them from existence, leaving nothing but expanding clouds of superheated plasma. Their tactics showed no emotion and their weapons showed no mercy. This was warfare reduced to its purest form. The complete destruction of anything that threatened human interests. Lieutenant Commander Julie Park led her Special Forces teams through the chaos of battle to infiltrate Korthic command vessels. Her soldiers moved through bioship corridors, like death incarnate, using weapons that dissolved Korthic armor and tactics that exploited every weakness in alien psychology. They targeted the hive minds that controlled entire fleets and turned the enemy's greatest strength into a fatal vulnerability. The psychological warfare programs developed by Professor Tim Brooks proved devastatingly effective against the Korthic collective consciousness. When key command nodes were disrupted, entire sections of the alien fleet began attacking each other as their coordination systems collapsed. The humans had found a way to turn the Korthic's hive mind against itself, creating chaos and confusion throughout the enemy formation. Admiral Collins watched the battle unfold with cold satisfaction. This was what humans did best. They identified an enemy's strengths and found ways to turn them into weaknesses. The Korthic had conquered through numbers and regeneration, but humans had developed weapons that could overwhelm any defense and tactics that exploited the rigidity of hive mind thinking. The second day of battle saw the introduction of humanity's most terrifying weapons. Planet crackers that could shatter worlds were used to destroy Korthic staging areas, while stellar manipulators destabilized the stars that powered enemy fleets. Swarm missiles that replicated themselves turned single shots into clouds of destruction that consumed entire squadrons. Captain Don Harper continued his deep strike missions behind enemy lines, targeting Korthic breeding worlds with weapons that sterilized entire continents. His ships carried biological agents developed by Dr. Carol Lee that specifically targeted Korthic reproductive systems. These weapons spread through alien populations like wildfire, leaving behind worlds populated only by the dying. The Zilani watched in horror as their protectors revealed the true extent of human military capability. The humans did not just wage war against enemy fleets, they attacked the very foundations of Korthic civilization. Breeding facilities, food production centers, and command structures were all systematically destroyed with weapons that seemed to violate the laws of physics. Major Kate Wilson coordinated the orbital bombardment of Korthic strongholds using weapons that could turn planets into molten slag. Her targeting computers identified critical infrastructure and eliminated it with surgical precision. The humans had moved beyond simple fleet actions to total warfare against an entire species. Chief Engineer Rob Clark had developed ammunition that not only destroyed bioships but prevented them from regenerating by introducing nanoscale machines that consumed organic matter at the molecular level. Korthic vessels that had survived previous battles found themselves dissolving from within as human weapons turned their own biology against them. The third day brought the final collapse of Korthic resistance as Emperor Jacques' flagship came under direct attack from the UHS Devastation. Admiral Collins had saved his most powerful weapons for this moment and unleashed a bombardment that lit up space for light years in every direction. The massive bioship tried to regenerate the damage but found itself overwhelmed by weapons that attacked on multiple levels. MUL, TAMEO, USLYZ, AKSSK transmitted a final message to surviving Korthic forces before his ship was destroyed. The Emperor's last words were a warning to the galaxy that humanity represented a force of destruction, unlike anything the universe had ever seen. The humans had not just defeated the Korthic Empire, they had demonstrated their willingness to commit genocide against any species that threatened their allies. The aftermath of the battle revealed the true scale of human victory. Over 5,000 Korthic bioships had been reduced to expanding clouds of debris while human losses numbered less than 50 vessels. The numerical advantage that had allowed the Korthic to conquer the galaxy meant nothing against human weapons and tactics. Dr. Rodriguez analyzed the wreckage of Korthic bioships and made disturbing discoveries about their technology. The aliens had incorporated genetic material from hundreds of conquered species into their ships and warriors. The humans had not just defeated an empire, they had liberated the genetic heritage of countless extinct civilizations. General Phillips began planning the occupation of former Korthic territory while construction crews built permanent naval bases throughout the region. The humans had no intention of simply defeating their enemies and withdrawing. They were establishing a military presence that would prevent any future threats to their allies. The surviving Korthic forces scattered across the galaxy, carrying with them the terror of their defeat. Their species had ruled through fear and intimidation for over a millennium, but now they were the ones who fled in panic. The humans had not just beaten them, they had broken their will to fight and their belief in their own superiority. Captain Lisa Wells commanded one of the pursuit fleets that hunted down escaping Korthic vessels. Her orders were simple: no enemy ship was to escape and carry word of human capabilities to potential allies. The humans understood that reputation was a weapon, and they intended to forge one that would prevent future conflicts through fear alone. The galactic community watched in stunned silence as reports of the human victory spread through known space. Species that had cowered before Korthic fleets for centuries suddenly found themselves free of the threat that had dominated their nightmares. But many began to wonder if they had simply traded one apex predator for another. Ambassador Veltar stood on the observation deck of his station and watched human ships establishing patrol routes around Zalani worlds. His people were safe, but the cost of that safety was becoming clear. The humans had not just protected the Zalani, they had announced their presence to the galaxy with a demonstration of military power that redefined what was possible in warfare. The Korthic Empire that had terrorized the galaxy for 1,000 years was broken and scattered within 6 months of encountering humanity. The humans had proven that no enemy was too powerful to defeat if sufficient force was applied with proper planning and absolute determination. The galaxy now had a new apex species, and they were building to stay. The war had ended, but its consequences were just beginning. Every species in known space now understood that humans were not simply another civilization to be catalogued and forgotten. They were a military force that could reshape the balance of power across entire sectors, and they had chosen to use that power to protect their friends. The question now was what they would do to their enemies. The Korthic Empire collapsed within 6 months of the Battle of Seven Suns. What had taken the insectoid species over 1,000 years to build was dismantled by human forces in less time than it took most civilizations to plan a single military campaign. The last organized Korthik fleet surrendered to Colonel Alex Murphy at the edge of their former territory, carrying with them Emperor Jacques' final transmission, a warning to the galaxy that humanity was not a species to be challenged. Murphy stood on the bridge of his command ship and watched Korthik biovessels power down their weapon systems in defeat. These aliens who had terrorized entire sectors now trembled before human military might. The colonel had fought in enough wars to understand that victory often came with unexpected consequences, but even he was surprised by how completely the enemy had been broken. The human occupation of former Korthik space proceeded with the same efficiency that had characterized their military campaign. Construction fleets built permanent naval bases on strategic worlds, while military governors established new administrative systems. The humans were not content to simply defeat their enemies. They intended to reshape the entire region according to their own vision of galactic security. Diplomat Helen Stone arrived from Earth to negotiate long-term defense agreements with the Zalani Federation and other liberated species. Her instructions were clear: establish human protection over any civilization that wanted it, while ensuring that potential threats could never again organize into a force capable of challenging human interests. The Zalani got their protection, but they also received a comprehensive education in human military doctrine. Ambassador Veltar found himself studying tactical manuals that described warfare, concepts his peaceful people had never imagined. The humans were sharing their knowledge, but they were also making it clear that their protection came with certain expectations. Stone's negotiations with the Zalani Council revealed the true scope of human ambitions. The defense agreement included provisions for joint military exercises, shared technology development, and the establishment of human bases on 12 Zalani worlds. The humans were not simply offering protection, they were creating a military alliance that would serve their strategic interests for generations to come. Dr. Amy Rodriguez spent months cataloging captured Korthik technology while construction crews built research facilities throughout the former empire. Her work revealed disturbing evidence of the aliens' consumption of other species, but also provided insights into biological technologies that could benefit human medicine and engineering. The most shocking discovery was a vast archive of genetic material from hundreds of extinct civilizations. The Korthik had consumed entire species but preserved their genetic heritage for potential military applications. Rodriguez's team began the delicate work of reconstructing these lost civilizations, using advanced human cloning and genetic manipulation techniques. Captain Susan Clark commanded the patrol fleets that enforced human authority throughout the former Korthik territory. Her ships carried enough firepower to sterilize planets, but their primary mission was to demonstrate human presence and capabilities to any potential threats. The humans understood that maintaining peace required the constant threat of overwhelming force. Construction of the permanent human naval facilities proceeded at a pace that amazed other species. Entire bases appeared on empty worlds within weeks, while orbital platforms that could service fleets of warships were assembled in space. Using automated systems, the humans were building infrastructure that would support military operations for centuries. The galactic community watched these developments with a mixture of gratitude and growing concern. The Korthik threat was gone, but it had been replaced by a human military presence that dwarfed anything previously seen in known space. Species that had welcomed human protection began to wonder if they had traded one form of domination for another. Ambassador Veltar reflected on his decision to contact the humans as he watched their bases rise around Zalani worlds. His people were safer than they had been in generations, but they were also dependent on protectors, who might prove more dangerous than the enemies they had defeated. The humans had fulfilled their promise, but at a cost the Zalani were only beginning to understand. The scattered remnants of the Korthik Empire served as a constant reminder of what happened to species that challenged human military power. Former warrior castes that had conquered hundreds of worlds now lived as refugees, begging for sanctuary from the very civilizations they had once enslaved. Their defeat was so complete that the galaxy would remember it for millennia. General Matt Phillips established the Human Defense Command with headquarters on a fortified world at the center of former Korthik space. This massive facility coordinated military operations across dozens of star systems while serving as a symbol of human commitment to galactic security. No species could look at the fortress and doubt human resolve. Dr. Carol Lee continued her biological weapons research using captured Korthik specimens to develop defensive measures against future organic threats. Her laboratories were hidden deep within human military bases, but their existence sent a clear message. Humanity was prepared to use any weapon necessary to protect their interests. The economic transformation of the liberated territories proceeded under human supervision, as trade agreements and resource extraction operations were established. The humans were not simply military occupiers, they were building an economic system that would bind former Korthik worlds to human civilization through mutual dependence. Professor Tim Brooks studied the psychological impact of human military dominance on other species and developed protocols for managing relationships with civilizations that might feel threatened by human power. His research showed that most species preferred human protection to the chaos that had existed before, but that careful management was needed to prevent resentment from building. The final Korthak holdouts were eliminated by hunter-killer squadrons that pursued them to the edges of known space. Captain Dan Harper led these missions with weapons specifically designed to prevent any possibility of Korthak resurgence. The humans were taking no chances with an enemy that had proven capable of rapid adaptation and reproduction. News of the human victory spread throughout the galaxy, carried by traders and diplomats who had witnessed the transformation of an entire sector. The story became legend. A peaceful species had asked for protection and received it from warriors who fought with weapons that bent the laws of physics and tactics, that treated warfare as a science to be perfected. The Zalani Council met to discuss their new relationship with humanity and found themselves facing decisions that would shape their civilization for generations. They could accept human protection and the obligations that came with it, or they could attempt to chart an independent course in a galaxy that had just been reminded how dangerous the universe could be. Ambassador Veltar made his final report to the Federation leadership and recommended full acceptance of the human alliance. His people had asked for protection from the Korthak threat and received security that extended far beyond their original request. The humans had not just defeated their enemies, they had eliminated the threat permanently. The galaxy settled into a new equilibrium, with human military power serving as the ultimate guarantor of peace and stability. Species that had lived in fear for centuries found themselves free to pursue trade and exploration, while potential aggressors reconsidered their plans in light of what had happened to the Korthik Empire. Dr. Rodriguez published her final analysis of the conflict and its implications for galactic civilization. Her conclusion was simple: humanity had demonstrated that no species was too powerful to defeat if sufficient force was applied with proper planning and absolute determination. The universe now had an apex predator that used its position to protect, rather than exploit, those under its care. The story of how the Zalani asked for protection and humans arrived with war machines became a cautionary tale told throughout known space. It reminded every civilization that when humans made a promise, they kept it regardless of the cost, and that their friendship came with an implicit threat to anyone who would harm those they had chosen to protect. The galaxy had learned that humanity's protection was absolute, but so was their capacity for destruction.